The rhythmic patter of rain against windows punctuated the otherwise quiet halls of Mercy General Hospital. Sarah Matthews, the head nurse of the NICU, stood before the large windows of the third floor, watching sheets of water cascade down the glass. The digital display on her watch showed 2:17 a.m., another graveyard shift that felt heavier than the rain clouds outside. The fluorescent lights cast a sterile glow across the corridor as Sarah made her rounds, her footsteps echoing against the polished floors. 6 months had passed since she lost her son Michael in a car accident, but time hadn't dulled the ache. Each tiny face in the NICU seemed to wear his features, each cry echoing his voice. "Sarah, we need you in room 307, called Jessica, a young nurse with worried eyes. Baby Noah's stats are dropping again." The mention of Noah Parker snapped Sarah from her reverie. Born 8 weeks premature, the infant had been fighting for his life for the past 10 days. His mother, Rachel Parker, was still recovering from an emergency C-section in the maternity ward 1 floor below. Sarah hurried to the room, her professional mask sliding into place. The monitoring equipment created a symphony of beeps and alerts, each sound carrying its own warning. Noah lay in his incubator, his tiny chest rising and falling with visible effort. His skin, usually a healthy pink despite his premature state, had taken on a concerning bluish tinge. "Oxygen saturation is at 82 and dropping," reported Dr. James Wilson, the attending physician. His normally calm demeanor showed cracks of concern. "We need to adjust his ventilator settings." Sarah moved with practiced efficiency, her hands steady despite the tremor in her heart. As she adjusted the equipment, memories of Michael's last day in the hospital crashed through her carefully constructed walls. The same beeping monitors, the same sense of helplessness, the same gut-wrenching fear. "Come on, little one," she whispered to Noah, her voice barely audible above the machinery. "You've got to fight." The next hour became a blur of medical interventions and careful monitoring. Sarah checked and rechecked every connection, every reading, while Dr. Wilson consulted with the respiratory specialist via phone. The rain continued its relentless drumming outside, creating a soundtrack to their battle against time. "Sarah," Dr. Wilson called softly, pulling her aside. "We need to discuss the possibility of transferring Noah to Children's Memorial. They have more advanced ECMO capabilities if his condition continues to deteriorate." The words hit her like physical blows. Children's Memorial was where Michael had spent his final days. The thought of another child making that journey threatened to unravel her completely. "His parents need to be notified," she managed to say, her professional tone masking the turmoil beneath. "I'll speak with Rachel." The elevator ride to the second floor gave Sarah precious moments to compose herself. The maternity ward was quieter, with most mothers and their newborns sleeping peacefully. Room 214 glowed with soft lamplight. Rachel Parker was awake. "Mrs. Parker?" Sarah knocked gently before entering. Rachel sat up in bed, her phone casting a blue glow across her face. The dark circles under her eyes spoke of sleepless nights and constant worry. "Is it Noah? Has something happened?" Rachel's voice cracked with fear. Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, choosing her words carefully. "Noah's having some difficulty with his breathing. Dr. Wilson is monitoring him closely, but we may need to transfer him to Children's Memorial for specialized treatment." Rachel's face crumpled, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I haven't even been able to hold him yet," she sobbed. "My husband's deployed overseas, and I can't lose my baby, Sarah. I can't." The raw emotion in Rachel's voice stripped away Sarah's professional distance. She found herself taking the younger woman's hand, feeling the tremors that matched her own internal shaking. "Noah is a fighter," Sarah said, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. "I've seen him overcome setbacks before. We're doing everything we can." As if punctuating her words, Sarah's pager buzzed urgently. The display showed a simple message, 307 stat. "I need to get back to Noah," she said, standing quickly. "Try to rest, Rachel. I'll send updates regularly." The return journey to the NICU felt endless. Sarah's mind raced with possibilities, procedures, and protocols. But beneath the professional calculations, a more personal battle raged. Each step forced her to confront the grief she'd been avoiding, the fear she'd been suppressing. When she reached room 307, she found Dr. Wilson bent over Noah's incubator, his expression intense with concentration. The monitors showed slightly improved numbers, but the crisis wasn't over. His oxygen levels stabilized somewhat, Dr. Wilson reported, but he's not out of the woods. We need to watch him carefully through the night. Sarah nodded, taking her position beside the incubator. As she looked down at Noah's tiny form, something shifted inside her. The pain of losing Michael would never disappear, but perhaps it could coexist with hope. Perhaps she could channel her loss into fighting harder for every child in her care. The rain eventually slowed to a gentle patter, and the first hints of dawn began to lighten the sky. Sarah remained at her post, watching Noah's chest rise and fall, counting each breath as a small victory. As morning light filtered through the rain-streaked windows of Mercy General Hospital, an unexpected visitor padded through the automatic doors of the main entrance. Bear, a massive golden retriever with gentle eyes and a therapy dog vest, walked purposefully beside his handler, Linda Thompson. The dog's presence immediately drew attention, his well-groomed coat almost glowing under the fluorescent lights. At the reception desk, Linda presented Bear's credentials and their scheduled visit authorization. The morning shift receptionist, Tom, couldn't help but smile as Bear sat patiently, his tail sweeping the polished floor in slow, steady movements. "Third floor, NICU," Tom said, issuing visitor badges to both Linda and Bear. "They're expecting you." The elevator ride was shared with Dr. Wilson, who had just finished his grueling night shift. Despite his exhaustion, he watched with interest as Bear maintained perfect composure in the confined space. "First time we've had a therapy dog in the NICU," he commented. "Sarah Matthews approved this. The hospital board approved a trial program," Linda explained. "Though I must admit, Bear usually chooses where he wants to go. He has an intuition about these things." As if on cue, when the elevator doors opened, Bear led them directly toward room 307. Sarah, who had been updating Noah's charts at the nurse's station, froze mid-sentence. The sight of the therapy dog heading straight for Noah's room sent a complex mix of emotions across her face. "Wait," she called out, hurrying to intercept them. "We need to discuss protocols first. The NICU is a sensitive environment." Linda nodded understanding, but Bear had already stopped outside Noah's room, sitting down and looking through the glass with unusual intensity. Jessica, who had just started her morning shift, approached cautiously. "I've read about animal therapy in NICUs," Jessica offered. "Studies show it can help stabilize vital signs and promote healing environments." Sarah's medical training warred with her instincts. The night's crisis with Noah was still fresh in her mind, and his condition remained delicate. Yet there was something about Bear's calm presence that seemed to affect everyone around him. "He's been tested for everything," Linda assured them, presenting Bear's medical clearance documents. "He's bathed and groomed before every hospital visit, and he's trained specifically for medical environments." While the adults discussed logistics, Bear maintained his position, his eyes fixed on the tiny infant in the incubator. Rachel Parker, who had convinced the maternity ward to let her visit Noah, rounded the corner in a wheelchair pushed by a nurse. She stopped short at the sight of the dog. "Oh," she breathed, tears welling in her eyes. "We had a golden retriever when I was growing up. Max, he was my best friend through everything." Bear turned his head at her voice, then did something unexpected. He walked over to Rachel, gently rested his head on her lap, and let out a soft whine. The simple gesture broke something open in the atmosphere. Rachel began to cry, her hands buried in Bear's fur. "The thing about Bear," Linda said softly, "is that he seems to know exactly who needs him most." Sarah watched the interaction, remembering how Michael had begged for a dog before his accident. They had always put it off, too busy, too much responsibility, too many hospital shifts. Now, seeing the profound effect Bear had on Rachel, she felt a shift in her perspective. "Okay," Sarah decided. "But we follow every protocol. Linda, you'll need to gown up. Bear needs the special sanitizing wipes, and we monitor Noah's vitals continuously." The next hour transformed the NICU's usual atmosphere. Bear lay calmly next to Noah's incubator, his presence somehow making the medical equipment seem less intimidating. Rachel sat nearby in her wheelchair, talking to her son with renewed energy. The other nurses, initially skeptical, found themselves drawn to the room's changed environment. "His oxygen saturation is up 2 points," Jessica reported, checking the monitors. "Heart rate's more stable too." Sarah stood back, observing the scene with professional interest that barely masked her personal turmoil. Bear occasionally glanced her way, as if extending an invitation, but she maintained her distance, clipboard clutched like a shield. The morning shift brought more staff members, each reacting differently to Bear's presence. Dr. Emily Chen, the day shift pediatrician, stopped to observe for several minutes before nodding approvingly. "I've read the research on therapy animals in NICUs. The parents often benefit as much as the patients." As if proving this point, Rachel had fallen asleep in her wheelchair, one hand still resting on Bear's back, looking more peaceful than she had in days. The dog hadn't moved, seemingly understanding his role in this moment of respite. When Linda finally announced it was time to leave, the effect on the ward was palpable. Rachel woke up, immediately reaching for Bear. "Will you come back?" she asked, looking between Linda and Sarah. Before Linda could respond, Sarah surprised herself by speaking. "We'll work out a regular schedule," she said. "As long as Noah's condition allows it." Bear stood, shook himself gently, and did one last round of the room. He stopped at Sarah's feet, looking up at her with eyes that seemed to hold centuries of wisdom. For the first time since Michael's death, Sarah felt her carefully constructed walls begin to crack. "Good boy," she whispered, finally allowing herself to touch his soft fur. The simple contact sent an unexpected wave of comfort through her body. As Bear and Linda departed, the NICU felt different. The machines still beeped, the fluorescent lights still hummed, but something had shifted. Sarah found herself looking at Noah's monitors, noting with cautious optimism that his vitals had remained stable throughout the visit. The days following Bear's initial visit to the NICU brought subtle yet noticeable changes to Mercy General Hospital. Sarah Matthews found herself checking the calendar more often, anticipating the therapy dog's scheduled appearances. The staff's initial skepticism had given way to a cautious optimism, particularly as Noah Parker's condition showed gradual improvement. On a crisp autumn morning, Sarah arrived for her shift earlier than usual. She paused at the nurse's station, overhearing a conversation between Jessica and Carlos, a veteran nurse known for his no-nonsense approach. "I'm telling you, Jess," Carlos was saying, his voice low but intense, "animals don't belong in a hospital. It's a liability waiting to happen." Jessica shook her head, her expression a mix of frustration and determination. "You weren't here last week, Carlos. You didn't see how Bear's presence affected not just Noah, but everyone around him. Even Dr. Chen is on board now." Sarah cleared her throat, causing both nurses to straighten up. "Let's keep an open mind," she said, her tone neutral but firm. "We're here for the patients, and if this program shows benefits, we adapt." As if on cue, the elevator doors opened, revealing Linda Thompson with Bear at her side. The dog's tail wagged gently as he recognized the familiar surroundings. Sarah noticed Carlos's frown deepen, but he remained silent as Bear and Linda made their way to Noah's room. Inside, Rachel Parker was already there, her face lighting up at the sight of the golden retriever. "Oh, Bear," she said softly, reaching out to stroke his fur. "We've been waiting for you." Sarah busied herself checking Noah's vitals, but she couldn't help observing the interaction. Rachel seemed more animated, talking to Bear about Noah's progress over the past week. "His doctor says he might be strong enough for kangaroo care soon," she said, her voice filled with a hope that had been absent in previous weeks. As Bear settled into his now familiar spot beside the incubator, Sarah noticed something she hadn't before. Noah, who had been fussing slightly, began to calm. His tiny fingers, which had been clenched tightly, slowly relaxed. "That's remarkable," Dr. Emily Chen said, entering the room quietly. "His heart rate is stabilizing, and look at his oxygen saturation levels." Sarah glanced at the monitors, confirming Dr. Chen's observation. The numbers were indeed improving, inching towards normal ranges for a baby of Noah's gestational age. "It's not just Noah," Jessica added, joining them. "Have you noticed how much calmer the whole NICU feels on Bear's visiting days? Even the parents of other babies seem less anxious." As the morning progressed, Sarah found herself spending more time in Noah's room than strictly necessary. She watched as Bear's presence seemed to create a bubble of tranquility, affecting everyone who entered. Parents of other NICU babies would stop by, drawn by the unusual sight of a dog in the ward. Many left with lighter steps and softer expressions. During a quiet moment, Sarah found herself alone with Bear and Noah. The dog looked up at her, his brown eyes seemingly full of understanding. For the first time in months, Sarah felt the tight knot of grief in her chest begin to loosen. "I had a son," she found herself saying, her voice barely above a whisper. "His name was Michael. He loved dogs, but we never." Her voice trailed off, caught by a sudden lump in her throat. Bear stood up, gently placing his head on Sarah's lap. The simple gesture broke something open inside her, and Sarah found herself crying silently, one hand on Bear's head, the other reaching out to touch Noah's incubator. A soft knock on the door frame pulled Sarah back to the present. It was Carlos, his usual stern expression replaced by something softer, almost vulnerable. I wanted to apologize," he said, stepping into the room. "I may have been too hasty in my judgment about the therapy dog program." Sarah quickly wiped her eyes, but not before Carlos noticed. His gaze moved from Sarah to Bear, then to Noah in his incubator. "You know," Carlos continued, his voice taking on a confessional tone, "I lost my daughter many years ago. She was about Noah's age. I guess I've been carrying that weight for so long, I forgot how to let it go." The admission hung in the air, heavy with shared understanding. Bear, sensing the shift in atmosphere, moved to sit between Sarah and Carlos, his tail gently sweeping across the floor. "It never really goes away, does it?" Sarah said softly. "The pain, I mean." Carlos shook his head. "No, it doesn't. But maybe it can change shape. Become something we carry differently." As they stood there, two healers united in their grief and their cautious hope, Noah stirred in his incubator. His tiny hand moved, reaching out as if sensing the emotional currents in the room. Sarah and Carlos both moved closer, watching as the premature infant's vitals continued to show improvement. "I think," Carlos said slowly, reaching down to tentatively pat Bear's head, "I'm beginning to understand why this works. It's not just about the patients, is it? It's about all of us." Sarah nodded, feeling a warmth spread through her chest that she hadn't experienced in months. "We're all healing together," she replied. The rest of Bear's visit passed in a blur of activity. Other staff members dropped by, each leaving with a sense of renewal. Even Dr. Wilson, stopping in before heading home after his night shift, commented on the positive changes he'd observed in Noah's condition. As Linda prepared to leave with Bear, Rachel caught Sarah's arm. "I don't know how to explain it," she said, her eyes bright with unshed tears, "but I feel like everything's going to be okay. For the first time since Noah was born, I really believe he's going to make it." Sarah squeezed Rachel's hand, her own eyes stinging. "We're all rooting for him," she said. "And we're here for you, every step of the way." After Bear and Linda left, the NICU settled into its usual routine, but something had fundamentally shifted. The beeping monitors and humming machines seemed less intrusive, the air less heavy with worry. As her shift neared its end, Sarah found herself standing once again at the windows where she'd watched the rain fall just a few short weeks ago. The sky was clear now, the setting sun painting the clouds in shades of pink and gold. For the first time in months, she felt a glimmer of something she'd thought lost forever: hope. She turned back to the NICU, watching as Carlos gently spoke to a worried set of new parents. Jessica efficiently checked on each tiny patient, and Dr. Chen studied Noah's latest test results with a small smile. In that moment, Sarah realized that healing wasn't just happening for the babies in their care. It was happening for all of them, one gentle paw print at a time. As autumn gave way to winter, Bear's visits to Mercy General Hospital became a cherished routine. The Golden Retriever's presence in the NICU had grown from a novel experiment to an integral part of the healing process, not just for the patients but for the staff as well. Sarah Matthews found herself at the center of this transformation, coordinating Bear's visits and observing the ripple effects throughout the hospital. On a frosty December morning, Sarah arrived at work to find an unusual buzz of activity. Dr. Emily Chen was deep in conversation with the hospital's administrative director, while Jessica and Carlos huddled over a stack of papers at the nurse's station. "What's going on?" Sarah asked, hanging up her coat. Jessica looked up, her eyes bright with excitement. "Dr. Chen's been compiling data on Bear's visits. The results are incredible, Sarah. We're seeing consistent improvements in patient outcomes, shorter NICU stays, and even better stress levels among staff and parents." Carlos nodded, adding, "The administration is considering expanding the program to other departments. Pediatrics, oncology, even the adult ICU." Sarah felt a surge of pride mixed with a twinge of apprehension. The program's success was undeniable, but expansion meant more responsibility, more coordination, and potentially more scrutiny. As if sensing her thoughts, Dr. Chen approached, her face serious but eyes twinkling. "Sarah, we need to talk about next steps. Your leadership on this has been invaluable. How would you feel about officially overseeing the expanded animal therapy program?" The offer caught Sarah off guard. For months, she'd been going through the motions, her grief over Michael's death coloring every aspect of her life. But now, standing in the NICU where so much had changed, she felt a spark of purpose ignite within her. I'd be honored," she said, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. The day unfolded with a new energy. As Sarah made her rounds, she found herself seeing the hospital through fresh eyes. In the pediatric ward, she imagined children's faces lighting up at Bear's visits. In oncology, she could almost hear the sighs of relief as patients found comfort in soft fur and unconditional love. When Bear and Linda arrived for their scheduled visit, the atmosphere in the NICU shifted palpably. Noah Parker, now significantly stronger and preparing for discharge, wiggled with excitement in his mother's arms. "Look who's here, Noah," Rachel cooed, her face radiant with joy. "It's our friend Bear." As Bear settled in for his visit, Sarah noticed a new face in the NICU, a young couple standing hesitantly by an incubator, their eyes red-rimmed and worried. She approached them gently. "I'm Sarah Matthews, the head nurse. Is this your first day here?" The woman nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Our daughter, Lily. She was born last night, 8 weeks early. The doctors say, they say her lungs aren't fully developed." Sarah's heart went out to them, remembering her own fear and helplessness when Michael was ill. "Would you like to meet someone special?" she asked, gesturing towards Bear. The couple looked confused but followed Sarah to where Bear was lying calmly beside Noah's now empty incubator. As they approached, Bear lifted his head, his soulful eyes seeming to assess the newcomers. "This is Bear," Sarah explained. "He's part of our animal therapy program. We've seen remarkable results with his presence here in the NICU." The father knelt down, tentatively reaching out to stroke Bear's fur. "Hey there, big guy," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Bear responded by gently placing his paw on the man's knee, eliciting a choked laugh. "Oh, Mark," the mother said, joining her husband on the floor. "He's so gentle." Sarah watched as Bear worked his magic, the couple's tense postures slowly relaxing as they petted him. "Would you like Bear to visit Lily?" she offered. The parents exchanged a look before nodding eagerly. Sarah coordinated with Linda, and soon Bear was lying serenely next to Lily's incubator. The tiny baby, who had been fussing earlier, seemed to calm in Bear's presence. "Her heart rate is stabilizing," Dr. Chen noted, checking the monitors. "And look at her oxygen levels, they're improving." As the day progressed, Sarah found herself juggling her regular duties with impromptu explanations of the animal therapy program to curious staff members from other departments. Word was spreading fast, and the excitement was palpable. During a rare quiet moment, Sarah found herself alone with Bear in the NICU break room. She sat on the floor beside him, running her fingers through his soft fur. "You're changing lives, you know that," she said softly. "Including mine." Bear looked at her with those understanding eyes, and Sarah felt the walls around her heart crumble a little more. For the first time since Michael's death, she allowed herself to remember the good times, his laughter, his curiosity, his love for animals. "I think Michael would have loved you," she whispered, hugging Bear gently. A knock at the door interrupted the moment. It was Carlos, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "Sarah, I have a favor to ask," he said, fidgeting with his ID badge. "My niece is in pediatrics, recovering from surgery. I was wondering if maybe." Sarah smiled, understanding immediately. "I'll talk to Linda about adding a stop in pediatrics today." Carlos's relief was palpable. "Thank you," he said simply, before hesitating and adding, "You know, I never thought I'd say this, but that dog, he's healing more than just the patients." As her shift neared its end, Sarah found herself in a meeting with the hospital administration, discussing the logistics of expanding the animal therapy program. The energy in the room was electric, with ideas flying back and forth about training more handlers, partnering with local shelters, and even starting a research study on the long-term effects of animal therapy in hospital settings. "Sarah," the administrative director said, "we want you to lead this initiative. Your work in the NICU has been exemplary, and your passion for this program is evident. What do you say?" Sarah felt a moment of vertigo, remembering the broken woman who had stood watching the rain just a few months ago. She thought of Noah, now thriving and almost ready to go home. She thought of Lily's parents, finding comfort in Bear's presence. She thought of Carlos, opening his heart again after years of grief. "I say yes," she replied, her voice strong and clear. "It's time to bring more healing to Mercy General." As she left the meeting, Sarah paused by the window where her journey had begun. The winter sky was clear, stars just beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. She placed her hand on the cool glass, feeling the boundary between her past and her future. "Thank you, Michael," she whispered, "for helping me find my way back to hope." With a deep breath, Sarah turned back to the bustling hospital corridors, ready to embark on the next chapter of her journey, one that promised healing not just for the patients, but for everyone whose lives would be touched by the power of unconditional love. The expansion of Mercy General's animal therapy program brought a whirlwind of activity to Sarah Matthews' life. As winter deepened, she found herself juggling her duties as head nurse of the NICU with her new role as coordinator of the hospital-wide initiative. The days blurred together in a flurry of meetings, training sessions, and the ever-present beeping of monitors. One particularly frigid January morning, Sarah arrived at the hospital to find an atmosphere of tense anticipation. Dr. Chen met her at the entrance, her usually calm demeanor visibly strained. "Sarah, we need you in the NICU stat," she said, leading the way to the elevator. "Lily's condition has taken a turn for the worse overnight. We're considering emergency measures." Sarah's heart sank as they rushed to the third floor. Lily, the premature baby girl who had responded so well to Bear's initial visits, had been making steady progress over the past month. This sudden decline was unexpected and alarming. As they entered the NICU, the gravity of the situation became apparent. Lily's incubator was surrounded by medical staff, the monitors displaying dangerously low oxygen levels and an erratic heartbeat. Her parents, Mark and Emily, stood nearby, their faces etched with fear and exhaustion. "Her lungs are struggling," Dr. Wilson explained, his voice tense. "We may need to put her on ECMO, but given her size, it's extremely risky." Sarah's mind raced, thinking of the progress they'd seen with animal therapy. "When is Bear scheduled to visit today?" she asked. Dr. Chen checked her watch. "Not for another 3 hours. I'm calling Linda," Sarah decided, pulling out her phone. "We need Bear here now." As Sarah made the call, explaining the urgency of the situation, she couldn't help but feel a twinge of doubt. Was she putting too much faith in the therapy dog program? What if it wasn't enough? Linda's voice came through, reassuring and determined. "We're on our way." Bear seems to sense something's up, he's already at the door. The next 30 minutes were a blur of activity. Sarah coordinated with the medical team, ensuring that all protocols were in place for an emergency therapy session. She spoke softly to Mark and Emily, explaining what they were trying to do, careful not to raise false hopes but unable to completely hide her own optimism. When Bear padded into the NICU, the atmosphere shifted palpably. The golden retriever made a beeline for Lily's incubator, sitting down beside it with an air of quiet determination. Linda, gowned and masked, stood back, allowing Bear to work his magic. "Look at her stats," Jessica whispered, pointing to the monitors. Lily's oxygen saturation was slowly climbing, her heart rate steadying. Dr. Wilson shook his head in disbelief. I've never seen anything like this. It's as if she knows he's here. For the next hour, Bear remained steadfastly by Lily's side. The medical team worked around him, adjusting medications and ventilator settings. Sarah found herself holding her breath, watching the numbers on the monitors inch towards safer levels. As the crisis slowly abated, Sarah became aware of the toll it had taken on everyone involved. Emily had sunk into a chair, tears of relief streaming down her face. Mark stood with one hand on the incubator, the other absently petting Bear. Even Dr. Wilson, known for his unflappable demeanor, looked shaken. I think, Dr. Chen said quietly, we've just witnessed something extraordinary. Sarah, your instinct to bring Bear in, it may have saved Lily's life. The weight of those words hit Sarah like a physical force. She thought of all the times she'd doubted herself, all the moments she'd questioned whether she could continue in this profession after losing Michael. Now, looking at Lily's stabilizing vitals and the hope rekindling in her parents' eyes, Sarah felt a surge of purpose. As the day progressed, news of Lily's turnaround spread through the hospital. Staff members from various departments found excuses to pass by the NICU, peering in to catch a glimpse of the miracle in progress. Sarah found herself fielding questions and sharing the story, each retelling reinforcing the impact of what had occurred. During a rare quiet moment, Sarah slipped away to the hospital chapel. She sat in the dim, peaceful room, allowing the emotions of the day to wash over her. Tears came, not the bitter tears of grief she'd grown accustomed to, but tears of release, of gratitude, of hope. Michael, she whispered into the silence, I think I understand now. Why I'm still here, why I need to keep going. Thank you for showing me the way. A soft knock interrupted her reverie. It was Carlos, his eyes red-rimmed but his expression serene. Thought I might find you here, he said, sitting down beside her. Quite a day, huh? Sarah nodded, wiping her eyes. I keep thinking, what if we hadn't started this program? What if Bear hadn't been here? Carlos was quiet for a moment before responding. You know, when I lost my daughter, I thought I'd never feel whole again. I closed myself off, went through the motions. But seeing what happened today, it's like a light came back on. Sarah reached out, squeezing his hand. We're all healing together, she said, echoing words she'd spoken weeks ago, but now fully understanding their depth. As they sat in companionable silence, Sarah's phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Chen. Lily's latest tests show significant improvement. ECMO off the table. Parents asking for you. Returning to the NICU, Sarah found the atmosphere transformed. The tension had dissipated, replaced by a cautious optimism. Lily, while still critical, was showing signs of the fighter she was. Mark and Emily looked up as Sarah approached, their eyes shining with gratitude. We don't know how to thank you, Emily said, her voice thick with emotion. Dr. Chen told us it was your idea to bring Bear in early. Sarah shook her head, deflecting the praise. Bear's the real hero here. And Lily, she's the one doing all the hard work. As if on cue, Lily's tiny hand moved, her fingers uncurling slightly. It was a small gesture, but in that moment, it felt monumental. The rest of the shift passed in a haze of cautious celebration and continued vigilance. As Sarah prepared to leave for the day, she found herself standing once again by the window where her journey had begun. The winter night was clear, stars twinkling in the vast expanse of sky. She thought about the path that had led her here, the crushing grief, the moments of doubt, the unexpected joy. She thought about Michael, about Lily, about all the lives touched by a simple act of bringing a dog into a place of healing. Dr. Chen joined her at the window, her usual professional demeanor softened by the day's events. You've started something remarkable here, Sarah, she said. This program, it's going to change lives. Sarah nodded, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. It already has, she replied softly. It's changed mine. As they stood there, looking out at the city lights, Sarah felt a sense of peace settle over her. The pain of losing Michael would always be a part of her, but it no longer defined her. Instead, it had become the catalyst for something beautiful, something healing. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new patients, new opportunities to make a difference. But for now, in this moment, Sarah allowed herself to simply be a healer, a friend, a woman rediscovering her purpose. The beeping of monitors and the soft whir of machines created a familiar symphony behind her. But now, mingled with those sounds, she could hear something else: the steady rhythm of hope, the gentle melody of healing, the strong, unwavering beat of a heart renewed. Spring arrived at Mercy General Hospital, bringing with it a renewed sense of hope and possibility. The animal therapy program, once a small experiment in the NICU, had blossomed into a hospital-wide initiative that was gaining national attention. Sarah Matthews found herself at the center of this transformation, her days filled with a purpose she had once thought lost forever. On a bright April morning, Sarah stood in the hospital's newly renovated atrium, surrounded by a buzz of excitement. Today marked the official launch of the expanded animal therapy program, and the space was filled with staff, patients, families, and a variety of therapy animals: dogs, cats, and even a gentle miniature horse. As Sarah surveyed the scene, she couldn't help but marvel at how far they'd come. Noah Parker, now a thriving 6-month-old, gurgled happily in his mother Rachel's arms as they petted a fluffy therapy cat. Lily, the premature baby whose life had hung in the balance just months ago, was cuddled in her father Mark's embrace, her eyes wide with wonder at the animals around her. Dr. Chen approached, a rare smile gracing her usually serious face. "Sarah, the press is here for the interview. Are you ready?" Sarah took a deep breath, smoothing her blazer. "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied, following Dr. Chen to where a small group of reporters had gathered. The interview passed in a blur of questions about the program's inception, its impact on patient outcomes, and plans for the future. Sarah found herself speaking with a confidence that surprised her, sharing stories of healing and hope that had unfolded over the past months. "Ms. Matthews," one reporter asked, "what inspired you to champion this program, especially in the face of initial skepticism?" Sarah paused, her mind flashing to Michael's smiling face. "Sometimes," she began carefully, "our greatest challenges can lead us to our most meaningful work. This program was born out of a personal loss, but it's grown into something that brings healing to so many." As the interview concluded, Sarah felt a familiar presence at her side. Bear, the golden retriever who had started it all, sat calmly beside her, his tail thumping gently against the floor. She knelt down, wrapping her arms around his neck in a grateful hug. "We did it, buddy," she whispered. "We really did it." The rest of the day unfolded in a whirlwind of activity. Sarah moved from department to department, checking in on therapy sessions and collecting feedback from staff and patients alike. In pediatrics, she watched as a group of children giggled delightedly while reading to a patient Labrador. In oncology, she saw tears of relief on a patient's face as they stroked a purring cat. In the NICU, Sarah paused longer, taking in the sight of tiny babies responding to the gentle presence of therapy animals. Dr. Wilson, once the most vocal skeptic of the program, now stood beaming as he explained the benefits to a group of medical students. "The decrease in stress hormones we're seeing is remarkable," he was saying. "And the improvement in parent-child bonding, it's changing our entire approach to neonatal care." As evening approached, Sarah found herself back in the atrium, now quieter as the day's events wound down. She sank into a comfortable chair, feeling the weight of the day's emotions settle over her. Carlos appeared, 2 cups of coffee in hand. "Thought you could use this," he said, offering her one. "Quite a day, huh?" Sarah nodded, gratefully accepting the coffee. "I keep pinching myself," she admitted. 6 months ago, I wasn't sure I could even continue nursing. And now you're changing the face of healthcare," Carlos finished, his voice warm with pride. "You know, I've been thinking a lot about what you said before, about how we're all healing together." Sarah looked at him questioningly, and he continued, "I've decided to start a support group for hospital staff who've experienced personal loss. Your journey, it inspired me to stop hiding from my own grief." Tears pricked at Sarah's eyes as she reached out to squeeze Carlos's hand. "That's wonderful," she said softly. "I think a lot of people will benefit from that." As they sat in companionable silence, Sarah's mind wandered over the events that had led to this moment. She thought of the rainy night when Bear first entered the hospital, of Lily's dramatic turnaround, of countless small miracles that had unfolded in the presence of gentle animals. Dr. Chen joined them, her usual clipboard absent for once. "I've just been on the phone with the board," she said, an unusual excitement in her voice. "They want to establish a research foundation dedicated to studying the long-term impacts of animal therapy in hospital settings. Sarah, they want you to lead it." The offer took Sarah's breath away. She thought of Michael, of how he would have loved to see animals helping people heal. She thought of all the patients and families whose lives had been touched by the program. And she thought of her own journey, from the depths of grief to this moment of profound purpose. "I'd be honored," she said, her voice steady and sure. As the last of the day's light faded, Sarah found herself once again by the window where her story had begun. The city lights twinkled below, mirroring the stars emerging in the darkening sky. Bear sat beside her, a constant, comforting presence. She reflected on the transformation that had taken place, not just in the hospital, but within herself. The pain of losing Michael would always be a part of her, but it no longer paralyzed her. Instead, it had become the catalyst for a journey of healing that extended far beyond herself. Sarah thought of Noah and Lily, two tiny fighters who had blossomed under the gentle influence of animal therapy. She thought of Rachel and Mark and Emily, parents whose fear had been eased by the simple presence of a compassionate animal. She thought of Carlos, finding his way back to connection and purpose. And she thought of all the lives yet to be touched, the patients who would find comfort, the staff who would rediscover their passion for healing, the families who would find hope in the darkest of times. As if sensing her reflective mood, Bear nuzzled her hand gently. Sarah smiled, scratching behind his ears. "You know," she said softly, "I think this is just the beginning." The hospital hummed with life behind her, monitors beeping, phones ringing, the soft murmur of voices. But now these sounds were accompanied by new notes, the gentle jingle of therapy dog collars, the soft purr of cats, the quiet whicker of the miniature horse. It was the symphony of a place not just of medicine, but of true healing. Sarah took a deep breath, feeling a sense of peace and purpose settle over her. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to grow and learn. But for now, in this moment, she allowed herself to simply be present, grateful for the journey that had brought her here, and excited for the path that lay ahead. As she turned back to the bustling hospital, Sarah felt Michael's presence stronger than ever. Not as a weight of grief, but as a gentle reminder of the love that had set her on this path. With Bear at her side and a heart full of hope, she stepped forward into the next chapter of her story. A story of healing, of connection, and of the enduring power of compassion.